Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Property AI Report. This is your weekly digest of all things property and AI, brought to you by me, Mal McCallion, and my good friend and co-host, Matt Goddard. Matt, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Mal. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. It is strangely pleasing that I can see you have burnt yourself in the sunshine today, as opposed to me doing it all over the summer. You've
That's
had
a
a
Zoom filter, Mal. It's a Zoom filter.
Right, okay, I believe you. Thousands wouldn't. All right, we have got a packed show today with loads and loads, particularly property stuff, but yeah, then also there's tech and AI stuff everywhere too. So without further ado, let us get stuck into our property news. All right, so first up, oh, look who's back. It's Purplebricks. This is a story about them posting a £37.8 million loss following the strike takeover. And there's numerous different reports about it being at risk of going bust. It remains reliant on shareholder support, but then there's some positive noises coming from said shareholders optimistic about its future. I have written a lot about Purplebricks, which we will probably come back to in a sec. But what's your take on this, Matt? How do you think this one's going to shake down?
I'm not surprised, to be honest, Mal. Obviously, it's the Strike merger, and obviously, oh, not even merger, really, was it? Strike acquired Purplebricks for, was it £1?
It was quid.
And Strike have never, ever made any money, have they? They've just been propped up by shareholder support, and they've got quite an interesting business model, and one that maybe was waiting for someone to actually see it succeed. And they acquired Purplebricks, which was an interesting approach. And then it was in November last year, Sam Mitchell stepped away, and so they've been carrying on to plough forwards. I do occasionally see the boards, but not as much as we do as the likes of EXP and others who seem to move more into that segment of the market. But I'm not the one with inches and inches of columns written about this, so maybe you want to pick up the baton.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I think my thoughts on the model are well recorded in terms of it is the current process or the current model that Purplebricks and Strike have been operating is basically you can list for free as long as you take their conveyancing and mortgage products, or you can pay like £1,000 or 1,500 quid or something to do the basics, and then there's another upgrade package. Yeah, listen, it's no surprise to me that this continues to lose money. I thought the acquisition by Strike was a bit of a moonshot. I think that they were just trying to acquire a recognizable brand, but I think it's a brand that's been tarnished over a long time now. And I think the overall number that's been invested in, or that had been invested in Purplebricks before it was sold for a quid, was £197 million. So for it to then be sold for £1 kind of says a lot about how reliant it is on shareholder support. And if you go back and look at how many actual transactions they did and then divide that 197 million by how many transactions they did, it was being heavily subsidized almost exclusively by investors, and that continues. So yeah, look, I don't think that I can see a way for it to become profitable. I think it's got to buy its way in. So it needs to advertise, which costs money, and the investors have got to throw that money in, and then it will see a little bit of a boost. But yeah, I think what it did for the industry, it did two things: one positive, one negative. On the positive side, it gave everybody a bit of a nudge towards tech. And actually got a lot of perhaps more traditional agents, some of the larger agents, the corporates, looking at property technology and kind of thinking, actually, we probably need to do a bit more on this. But then clearly on the negative side, it absolutely hammered down commission rates and made everyone believe that essentially estate agents in the UK were ripping people off, when actually estate agents in the UK have got amongst the lowest fees in the entire world at about 1.2%. Whereas over in the States, it's 3 + 3 is 6. In other places like Australia, you also get vendor paid $2,000 on top. Yeah, I think I'm not surprised where it is. I wonder how much longer Charles Dunstan and others can continue to subsidize, and maybe that's permanent. He's on record as saying he wants to essentially destroy a state agency in this country. Sorry, disrupt. And that's his goal. And it's like, okay, it's going to cost you a bit. So yeah, I imagine it will continue for a little while. They seem to be doubling down as far as the shareholder report is concerned. But yeah, I think the headline in the negotiator was Purplebricks at risk of going bust. And I think that risk continues, right?
Yeah, all the way through.
Okay, so that's our first property news story. Second, we're popping over stateside, and this is just kind of huge deal where Compass and Anywhere have essentially merged. And essentially, so Compass is a broker. It's got loads and loads of independent agents. So does Anywhere. But the idea with this is essentially by combining them together, what they've got is a huge amount of extra inventory, and they're in this battle with Zillow. Okay, so Zillow is broadly the kind of right move of America. I mean, you can think of kind of Compass as a bit EXPE, but quite a bit larger. So yeah, what they're essentially trying to do is to force Zillow to accept that they will have content, Compass and Anywhere properties, and will not go on to Zillow straight away. And Zillow is trying to force them to list those properties immediately. And Zillow is saying, and you can imagine Rightmove doing this, saying, unless you list with us within the first 24 hours of putting a signboard outside the house, of it going live, then you will never be able to list it on Rightmove, and in this case Zillow. It's been a real battle over there and a huge story. And yeah, I just think it's a really interesting power battle. It's just that they're arm wrestling for almost kind of control of the industry.
Well, we've covered the background to certainly Compass and the Zillow piece on previous podcasts, but just that whole taking each other to court, and didn't CoStar also start lobbing rocks at them from a distance with
Zillow, yeah.
Homes.com? And it was very much as you say over that you need to be listing on at Zillow, and as we've alluded to, for me it's a data play. Zillow wants all of Compass's data. Compass are a bit like, no, it's mine, we're going to back away. And now with this merger or acquisition, it's going to create a behemoth of 210,000 agents. So when you said slightly bigger than EXP, I think there's a few zeros on the end, and an incredible 20% share of the US market. So absolutely huge. And obviously to Zillow, that's quite a huge amount. They call it inventory over there, don't they? But listing property that's not going to come into play. And for me, this is still underpinned by that access to the data, that first publisher first piece that really controls all of the large language models and the artificial intelligence. And whilst it's not the thing that's being pushed through the courts when they're talking about it, it's very much that play. And this is only going to bolster Compass's position and probably make Zillow get even more aggressive now.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then they've got a separate court case where Compass is suing Zillow for using their images without permission, stuff like that. So it's all getting very nasty. But yeah, as you say, it's all about the data. It's all about the content, who owns it, who gets to publish it, who gets to publish it first. And yeah, the fact that they've now called the cavalry over the hill and decided to merge with Anywhere. Yeah, as you say, is now accrued 20% of property listings on one side of the gate, and then Zillow's got most of the other 80%. Interesting times, and I think it's one that I think we should all be watching, because I think it is not something that is going unnoticed by some of the other dominant portals around the world, and particularly in the UK as well. Yes, going to be interesting to keep an eye on that one as it trundles through both the courts and out in the kind of the economic landscape too. All right, our third story for this week is it's about recruitment. Now, there was a story that came out in The Negotiator this week about property industry vacancies falling off a cliff. And I think that the quote was from Property Personnel that about 30% of vacancies have disappeared compared with this time last year. But Matt, you've got an insight on this, kind of hot off the press from elsewhere in the recruitment.
Very hot off the press. Well, I was waiting for you to get back from your day out with the Property Academy, and I was actually reading through the show notes, and they're not going to pick up on that. I'm going to talk over your noises. But beforehand, actually, I was reading the article over, and for anybody listening, Mal and I, during the course of the week, pop stories into a Notion, and then we curate those towards the end. And this one I'd missed. And as I was reading the article saying that vacancies were down 30%, it didn't ring true to me or smack true in terms of what I see through my LinkedIn, chatting to people, agents while I'm out there. Obviously, I was looking and I see the fortnightly Foxton's new starters photo with 35 to 40 people joining. I'd seen some quite senior moves. Susie Robertson, who'd been at Sotheby's previously, gone in very high up in lettings for Lohman Group. And the head of client services has gone into Campions across Chestons and Chase Buchanan. And a number of people seeming to get promoted, seeming to go into roles. And I know from the companies that I work with, the likes of ASAP, we're always looking for good new sales progressors. So those vacancies didn't seem to be drying up in the way they were. So while I was waiting for you to get back, Mal, and it wasn't that you were ridiculously late, I was chatting to Josh Rayner from Rayner Personnel, and Josh actually said they're currently probably more like 30% up on vacancies, and they're getting filled. And actually, they've just had a record month in August this year. It doesn't quite seem, but we sometimes think of ourselves as being in a sort of microcosm with these things and not a whole Liz Truss situation, but maybe we're looking at different elements of the market compared to what this article was intended.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And the most difficult thing is to get like for like. So actually, if there has been a big change in a client base, for example, either positive or negative, then that can really skew the figures. But yeah, 30% is a lot, either up or down. It's
Mhm.
quite a lot, particularly if you've got a 60% swing. So yeah, it's a confused picture. I think it's probably at best. But yeah, as you say, so I look at this through the lens of thinking, right, across the economy, if you look at recruitment figures, particularly in the junior areas, then it does seem that there has been, at the very least, a slowdown in that particular area. And that's not just in property, that's elsewhere as well. And a lot of that is being put down to the fact that AI is very good at doing some of the more basic tasks, right? Some of the more monotonous, what you might I certainly started out doing when I started my career, which is just basic stuff, administrative tasks. If that is removing some of that work, then yeah, look, hopefully what that's doing is just supercharging people being able to afford people further up and actually being able to continue to recruit at perhaps more specialized levels. But yeah, I think anecdotally, I haven't heard that it's significant enough. This 30% significant anecdotally, but yeah, it was interesting to see this initial report, and yeah, I guess you just take it as at face value, unless you've got a hotline to old Josh.
Yes, no, exactly. And it's in our tech news actually, and I think bringing it forward is quite appropriate. Accenture
Yeah.
announced this week that they've actually laid off 11,000 staff to artificial intelligence. Very much a case of saying either you get on the bus or you're being left behind. And 11,000 staff now, obviously, Accenture are phenomenally large, and quite a lot, as you just alluded to. Roles are entry level roles, but also low level development roles that they have in their business. There is that flip side of the coin where companies are looking at changing the structure of their businesses into more knowledge workers rather than that sort of administrative process.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, with regard to the developers and the kind of starting level developers, Anthropic has just released Claude 4.5, hasn't it? And that's supposed to be an even better coder than ChatGPT's Codex, which was the most phenomenal one until yeah, today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Codex, which you could leave running for 21 hours, come back, and it's basically done everything for you. And that's Codex being backed by ChatGPT 5, wasn't it? So I think
Yeah.
the recruitment area is always interesting. And we spoke weeks or even months ago now that the top four aren't using their trainees to do initial interviews anymore. They're using AI voice bots to do it. So we will see the shape change. But as coming back to the initial article, that sort of 30% down, I think is probably a very specific piece of the market, as you alluded to.
Got it. All right. That is our property news for this week. Let's more continue with our AI and tech news. All right, so we have a brand new word in our lexicon as of this week. What is it, Matt? And what does it mean?
Work slop.
Work slop.
So this is for all of you, and I receive on a regular basis, where you get those seemingly very well crafted reams and reams of text emails on your page that suddenly realize that someone's put two or three words into a chat GPT or a Claude and taken the email lock, stock and barrel and pasted it over to you. And then it's your job to try work it all out. And this is work slop. So we've talked about AI slop before and to do with images and videos, and Meta have just in the last couple of days, Meta have released the ability to generate videos within Meta that you can then just post away, haven't you?
There's vibes. Yeah,
There you go, vibes.
essentially, if you thought TikTok was full of absolute rubbish, then yeah, Meta's Vibes platform is basically entirely AI slop, basically. So you can just type in anything. And yeah, if you go onto it, you can just scroll through loads and loads and loads of slop. But this is a little bit different because it's work slop.
That's it. And it's an interesting one, and the word fits, but I don't think this is an AI word. I
Hmm.
think the term's going to come forward because more and more people are starting to call it out as being, well, hold on, you've not written that email, you've just put a couple of words or sentences into Copilot and sent it to me without thinking about it. And you know that because it comes through with the Z's instead of S's for specialization or something like that.
The
And
long dashes.
I think this has existed for years, if not decades. The amount of presentation slide decks you get emailed round a board, and you have to try work out what the person's trying to say because they've just spilt their work slop onto a page. Is it really an AI challenge, this one? And it came up for me because it's the word of the week on the articles and the blogs and the podcasts. But then it really rung true, and I was on a call with Luke Remington from House and House early this week, and he complained about the volume of AI emails he was getting through, and it was like, actually, if managing directors of companies are calling it out, then it really does show that these things are getting bandied around too often, and it does
Mm.
make you stop and think, well done. Here's that presentation I put together. Have I curated it? Have I reviewed what's gone into it? And before it's been fired off as the answer.
Yeah.
But I still come back to, I don't know if this is just an AI point, and is it something that's been around for ages and now AI is getting the blame?
Yeah, I think that's right. It's just shortcuts, essentially, isn't it? It's like making somebody else do the work because you can't be bothered. So yeah, look, it's come from this report that basically says that yeah, more and more companies are seeing people trying to pass off AI work as their own without checking that it's got its facts straight and all that sort of stuff. Yes, more and more. I think it's just going to make people. If I got loads of that, then I'd just be looking at the person giving it to me and just thinking, if all you're doing is just typing in a prompt into ChatGPT, I could do that. And yeah, therefore, what's the point of actually having you in the team? So yeah, I think it's something that will probably be around for a little bit, and then everybody will realize that this isn't worth doing because you're going to get fired. And then it will disappear. But yeah, I think it's going to be something that we're all going to have to just navigate for a little while longer for sure. All right, next up, we did just want to touch on this new treatment for Huntington's disease. Those that know or have been involved in the Do It for Dom charity initiatives that's been run by certainly Suzanne Averty, David Mintz, and others, Simon Whale, over recent years. Has been involved as well, and many others. And they've raised tens of thousands, if not more, for Huntington's research, because essentially over in there's one of our colleagues over in
Don Subiani of FBM, wasn't it?
yeah, it's Tom Sibiani, thank you. So he's had Huntington's, and yeah, it is basically a disease that is incurable to this point, but they've managed to find some cures using AI actually, that at least delays it for some years and enables people to live fuller lives. So yeah, we just wanted to mention it because we know a lot of people in the industry have done a lot of work on that, and well done them, because it looks like the research that has been made possible has had some significant breakthroughs. So that's great news, and well done to everybody who's been involved in that. So next up, wanted to cover a little bit about parental controls. OpenAI has launched parental controls in ChatGPT. Now, as with many parental controls, they're slightly complicated, and you've got to get your teen to agree that not that you're going to see all of their prompts or all of their questions or anything like that, but that they will allow you to be alerted if it starts to spiral and if anything goes quite negative. So I think the intention is good. I worry about the effectiveness and whether actually whether teens are just going to work on a workaround anyway. And if they are feeling that inclined, then actually is it going to work? But I think it's at the very least, it's a kind of start. And we're starting to see at least some movement towards these large language model companies actually addressing some of the big problems that they potentially are engendering in teens and others.
That's it. And it's that sort of awareness and focus, I guess. But it also parallels with the fact that OpenAI brought this CEO of applications in, and they're moving much more into that productization of ChatGPT now. So looking at the parental controls that have gone around things like Instagram previously and YouTube, and obviously taking nods from that. As you say, I think it was how they're going to implement it. It's an interesting one because it's very much a case of it will flag any concerns, but it won't say what the concern is. And as you say, it's down to the teen opting in, but at least it's taking those first steps, especially at a stage where America's regulations of all of the AI is still very much up in the air, while obviously EU are working through. So to have those considerations, those discussion points taking place is only a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. So some big moves by them. Also, there's a couple more of the big beasts over in the States that have been making moves. Microsoft and Apple have both been in the news this week. Microsoft, because their CEO, Satya Nadella, has basically been almost, I don't know, opining to the entire of the Microsoft workers that he's worried that AI is going to basically destroy the entire company. And he's alluding to a company back in the early 70s that didn't keep pace with IBM and therefore was made obsolete. They're called the Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC. So yeah, look, it's almost like he's had a bit of a kind of meltdown or a bit of a breakdown, like live in front of all of his team. The team are obviously on at him, and certainly they've got problems internally because culturally a lot's changed over the last couple of years. Obviously, there's much more AI involved in what they do, but that's also led to a lot of layoffs and a lot of kind of unhappiness amongst the rest of the team. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see that sort of play out alive. And at the same time, another company that's been struggling really to address AI is Apple, and it's been discovered that they've got a chatbot called Veritas, which is news. and it's a bit of a test for series upgrade.
That's it. On the Apple one, I'll come back to Satya Nadella, but on the Apple one, the Veritas is being used internally by the Apple team to basically test their new large language models. So while we've all been calling them out for falling behind and questioning their future, this is their next attempt to maybe a bit like Google with Bard, put that behind them and try get back coming
Yeah.
forward. And it's powering the new Siri by the sound of things, and Veritas is their internal test piece, but there's by no means leap of faith to see it being an app that they suddenly get on all your iPhones and your Mac that you're looking at there, and it's trying to get you to use that over and above ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot. And they've come back quite aggressive, but maybe subtly. Obviously, in their latest announcement, they had the AirPod Pro 3 that had the live translations within them, and
Yeah,
obviously
I
that's
like
being
that.
powered by something. So Veritas is the thing that's being used internally, but it sounds like it's the steps along the way where maybe they're not making as big a song and dance as they have done previously with Apple Intelligence, but
Yeah.
they're still working by the sound of things on their Google relationship to bring Gemini into the mix too, focusing on a few different places. One, maybe we'll get to a stage where we can ask Siri what the time is and we'll actually get the answer back. Who knows? But there's steps there. But on Microsoft, I think he called it an existential threat, didn't he, Satya Nadella? And you can understand this with a number of LinkedIn posts where people say PowerPoint's dead, Excel's dead, and Word's dead. And you can see with we touched on earlier, OpenAI and ChatGPT becoming more of an application that you actually need programs like Word or PowerPoint. And I appreciate it's not Microsoft, but even Photoshop with the likes of Nano Banana to do your editing and changing when actually you move through. And I think Microsoft is maybe over egging it a little bit, but Satya Nadella, it wasn't that long ago where they were having to pivot pretty aggressively, weren't they, to pull back from the brink after they got left behind on the old days where you used to pay for your software up front, and they put everything into hosting and moved everyone on subscription models, and that sort of brought Microsoft back.
They
You do
do.
have to keep moving with the times, otherwise you end up as the next Kodak or Blockbuster or any other of those companies that get left behind.
It's true. If you do look back at the late 90s into the 2000s, how they did pivot into, as you say, the kind of cloud versions of their software and actually managed, I looked, as you say, for a while, they might actually go become completely obsolete. Google released all of their sort of workspace drive things where you could get like sheets and so on. But yeah, they just managed to hold it together and then they've kicked on and I think they've had the most profitable year last year because of AI and stuff. But yeah, I think he is over egging it a little bit. But at the same time, as you say, a lot of their products and services are likely to undergo some radical changes if they're going to continue to meet the needs of the market. And particularly when you've got aggressive competitors like OpenAI, who are particularly focused on the consumer side, and then you've got Claude and others going after the enterprise level as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I do think it was very much a bit of a look, everybody be afraid, and yes, more of you are going to lose your jobs, but that's because AI basically. So just warming them up for that particular eventuality. All right, that is our AI and tech news for this week. We are now going to do our AI tool of the week. So we're back with OpenAI, and they have launched this week ChatGPT Pulse. Now, essentially what this does, and it's only available, there's loads of caveats about it being available, but basically I think at this point you've got to be on the $200 per month pro package. And it's called Pulse. What it does is you can tell it your interests or it will learn your interests from what you've told it before, what your questions you're asking it, and it will then send you every morning a kind of digest, right, of things it thinks that you are going to be interested by.
That's it. So I think the new buzz phrase on top of work slot, which we obviously just brought in earlier, is ambient AI, isn't it? It knows what you want to think. And I do get caught out with this occasionally. You and I think use GPT, Claude, Copilot for various tasks, probably pretty consistent. But then others that I've introduced to it maybe use it more for working out if Middlesbrough are going to win this week or what their fancy football team might look like, or John Oliver, I'm looking at you probably, which yeah, maybe their ambient AI pulse summary is gonna look slightly different to what ours might be. But it's very much that case of I'm a bit hesitant on this because I've already got ChatGPT sending me certain notifications during the day with updates on certain things, but I'm concerned that it just becomes more spam.
Yeah, it is interesting because actually, so the thing that I get scheduled by ChatGPT is yeah, after a while you do just ignore it for a while and then you can go and read it all at the same time. But yeah, and I think as we were talking off air, what you were saying was that it's much more likely to become a sort of advertising medium.
That's it.
Now, OpenAI has a huge gap. Yes, it's raised billions and billions, and it makes billions and billions, but it also loses billions and billions. And somehow it has got to square all that circle while still developing all the new models and still paying for all the compute and that. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that this might actually be the first shot across the bows of, right, actually now can we get something that's going out to consumers that we can get sponsored, essentially, or we can actually add adverts to.
They have to move into advertising at some point, don't they, to try and recoup any of that those losses or the money that they're not making. And this has got that smacked all over it. That, and obviously editing the way that the screen looks when you log in and use ChatGPT, suddenly have massive advertising hoardings across all of that. But these daily pulses, I'm sure actually it'd be very useful, and to have a notification of all your meetings that day with research in the background about who you're meeting and information about your last calls, and all those things pulled together into a morning digest, I'm sure would be exceptionally useful. But if it's then got various adverts woven in, it's just picking that out from all the other emails and advertising you get through in the morning.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how they execute and actually how relevant it ends up being. I'm sure the early stages of it, just like most V1s, will probably be a little bit rubbish and miss the mark and include things that are completely irrelevant. But over time, I'm sure it will learn, and then it might become part of our days. But no, without doubt, Google Gemini will release one, and Grok and all the others will release one really quickly as well. So you'll be able to take your pick. All right, that is all we've got time for this week. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Matt, really good to catch up again. Thanks for being there, and thanks for waiting until I finally did turn up.
It was great to see you, Mal, and I'm pleased you had a great day in Property Academy with the gang. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but I had to witness Everton at a board draw at, I was going to say Goodison Park, but the Hill Dickinson. It was good fun regardless.
Nice one. All right. Listen, thanks to everybody for listening in or watching. We will be back again next week for plenty more on the world of property and AI. So we will see you then. Have great weeks.
Until next time, everyone, take care.